Hi, welcome to Brickhouse Vintage. My name is Heather.
And I'm Ethan.
And today we're going to take you along with us and show you how we're going to transform an outdated coffee table into a beautiful farmhouse piece.
So let's get going. So first we're going to start by sanding down the top. You can use a stripper on this if you want. I usually use citrus strip on heavy finishes, but if it's a lighter finish on top, I'll just sand it down. On this I start with an 80 grit sandpaper, really get some of that heavy finish off, and I'm going to work my way down to a 150 and then to a 220 grit to finish it off. So for the most part, you just want to let the sander do the work. Don't push too hard, or you'll leave scarring marks in the actual wood. So let the sander do the work. With the first lower grit sandpaper, you're basically just looking to really rough it up and get a lot of the heavy finish off.
Is there a reason why we/you sand the top first and then I paint? Or does it matter if you paint first, sand later?
So we usually sand first so that we don't mess the paint up. I don't mess the paint up. Usually get it sanded mostly, and that way if you have to go back, if you get a little paint on or something, we can go back and sand it before we stain it. And always make sure you wear your proper PPE and masks and things like that. I was being a very bad boy and I didn't wear my mask because I don't like masks, but use your discretion. Although having it hooked up to the vacuum takes care of most of the dust. There's very little that actually escapes. Alright, now I'm going to switch to the 150 grit and get a little bit more of the finish off.
That wood's actually really pretty. Did you ever use a little piece of sandpaper and get in those little cracks?
No.
No, you just left
I
it?
left it for this just to give it a little more depth.
Did you change sandpapers again at this point?
Nope, we're still at 150 grit. Now we switch to the 220 grit.
And what does the 220 grit do?
It's just a finer grit sandpaper, so it gives it a nicer finish. I'm going to work your way to the higher grit sandpapers to help take out the roughness. And now when you're pretty much done sanding with an orbital sander, you'll almost always have little swirl marks in the wood. So what I do is I take a piece of sandpaper and go with the grain and just kind of try to get some of those swirls out. And you got to make sure you go with the grain, otherwise you're going to see the scratches.
Did you get a different one now?
It's the same grit, it's just a different piece of sandpaper. Usually when I use something a little bit lighter with this too, I wouldn't go lower than a 150, but sometimes a 220 might be a little too light to really remove the swirls. So somewhere in there.
All right, now we get down to business.
First, I like to tape off the bottom just to have clear, clean lines for when it's painted.
Especially since I paint messy.
Especially since she paints messy. But we're not going to refinish the bottom of this. We're not going to stain it or paint it since it's a low table. You're not going to see it anyway. So we're going to try to minimize where the paint goes by taping it off.
All right, so this right here is TSP. We use this to get the crud off the table. Usually you'd measure out a little bit of it. I think it's like a tablespoon to a gallon, something like that. There's only a tiny bit left in that bottle, so I just diluted it with a little water in the bottle. and used it straight out of the bottle. But you should follow the directions on the back. All we do here is just kind of wipe it down, make sure that if anyone used any furniture polish, you're kind of getting through that.
Or if there's any oils or
oils
like
just even from where somebody might have touched over and over. On the bottom of a table, you're not going to really get that. On some certain pieces of furniture, especially like around handles and stuff, you might have that. All right, we are going to paint this with Fusion Mineral Paint, and we're using the color Limestone. Fusion is one of our...
Silk.
No, we use Limestone.
Oh.
Did you miss where I held up the bottle and it said Limestone?
I did. Where was I?
I don't know. Anyway, Limestone is a really pretty cream color. It's a true cream with kind of yellowy undertones, but definitely more cream than white. It's a nice farmhouse color, but we went through and did, well, I went through and did one coat. Then we let it dry a couple hours, and I went back and did a second coat. Thought maybe a second coat would be enough, but I ended up doing 3. We won't show you all 3 coats. You get the idea. Fusion is a really nice paint to use, though. We've been using that for years because it has a self-leveler in it, so it paints very smoothly.
It also has a built-in top coat, right?
Yep.
A built-in finish.
A built-in finish. You can go over it again with something else at the end if you want, like wax, or they have a top coat you can put on, but for table legs, we didn't do that. Especially since we distress everything, so...
And it'll depend on the piece, too,
Yep.
right? Sometimes it'll take 1 or 2 coats. Sometimes it'll take 3 or 4.
It depends on the color that you're using and the color you're painting over. Just make sure you give it enough time to dry in between. And you'll know, we didn't use anything like any kind of a primer on this. And it stuck really well, especially since we cleaned it with the TSP. But you'll know if you start painting it on and it looks almost like oil repelling off of water, like beading up and not sticking on, then you know there's something on there that it doesn't want to stick to. And you'll either have to clean it better, or you can even scuff sand it. If neither of those things work, they do have a product called Ultra Grip, and you can paint that on first. But we rarely ever need to use Ultra Grip.
Or primer.
Or primer. Alright, so through the magic of cinema, we've now put 3 coats of paint on this.
So now that the painting is done, dry, we're going to remove the tape, and we're going to do some distressing using sandpaper.
Do not let the paint dry too much with the tape on, because if you let that tape on there for days or something like that and you try and rip it off, you might rip the paint back off.
Correct. And then you'll have to take a razor blade or something and go along the edge.
Also, something I didn't mention when you saw us painting, it is summer right now and it is hot outside, and this paint dries fast in the heat. So try not to go back over places, because the more you go back over it, then you're going to get the brush strokes. So do a quick coat and let it fully dry and then go back. Don't keep working the paint.
So as you can see, Heather spilled some paint all over the bottom of this. So we're going to take a sander to that and just kind of scuff it up and try to get some of that paint off.
He knew that was
good. Uniform.
He knew that was going to happen. So just to clarify, you did not go back and stain the bottom of this table, correct?
I did not. Just roughed it up and gave it more of its own distressed look.
This actually looks really pretty with the raw wood and the limestone.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of wish we'd done a lighter stain on it now. How long did it take us to do this table? One day? I can't remember now.
It was within one day. With the coats of the SFO on top, by the time it dried, it was over the course of 2 or 3 days. But overall, the majority of it was done in one day. So now we're going to start distressing. Usually just take a piece of sandpaper. Again, try 220 just so you limit any scratching, but sometimes Fusion is very tough and 220 just won't sand through very well. Sometimes you may have to go down to like a 150.
Again, do not let the paint set for days and days and days and then decide you want to distress it, because the longer it sits, the harder it cures and the harder it's going to be for you to distress it. A tip that I like to tell people to do, and that I use a lot, is to kind of wet the sandpaper a little bit. It helps get through the paint. Now this, we're sanding it, distressing it, the same day that I painted it, so it's not that difficult to get through.
There's no real method to doing it. I just like to hit all the details, corners, edges, make those details really stand out. If there's certain pieces sometimes where I'll distress heavier, like on a bench, for example, I like to distress more realistic, so I'll distress the seat a little bit heavier, as if somebody was sitting on it for years.
As if your bum wore the paint off.
Yeah. But for the most part, it's just kind of random, just whatever looks
Well,
good.
I think a good rule of thumb for distressing is, number one, hit the places that would get the most wear and tear naturally. So on the legs of the table, you're going to get where, like, your toe would scuff it. Or a bench where your bum would sit on it. And then also, if there's details on a piece, hit the places where you want to pull out those details and make them kind of pop. Because seeing that wood show through the paint is going to really draw your eye to those areas.
And if there's a lot of flat surface, like on a dresser or something like that, a lot of times we'll take the sander to it, and you just let the sander kind of do its own thing, and you just kind of work with it. So sometimes it has a mind of its own, and you get something completely unique. Yep. But on this piece with no flat areas, it's pretty much all going to be hand sanding.
So you kind of want to do it even but not uniform. You wouldn't want to distress one leg a whole ton and then not do the other leg at all. That would just look silly.
Or would it?
It would look silly for me. But you do you. Also, you kind of have to know your own style. So we're doing furniture because we flip it and we sell it in our booth business. But if you were going to have this in your house and you don't really care for distressing, then don't distress it.
So now we're going to apply the SFO. This is Stain and Finishing Oil by Fusion. This color is Cappuccino. Wanted to go with something a little bit darker, but not too dark. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of choices because the pine soaks up stain so well. It still came out pretty dark, but it came out nice.
What are you using to apply it?
So I'm just using shop cloths. You don't need to be real pretty with it, just kind of rub it on pretty heavily. Make sure you get a nice coat on there.
Are there any differences between the stain and finishing oil versus regular stain?
So the stain and finishing oil has kind of a built-in top coat to it as well. The oil gives it added protection. Just make sure you're following the directions on the back of the can. You're supposed to apply a coat, wait, I believe it's 15 minutes, and then wipe off the excess.
Is that different than regular stain, the application?
A little bit, yeah. Some stains take, up to 8 hours to dry. But it's real easy to apply. Apply your one coat, wipe it off, and then you can apply follow-up coats. I believe on this one we ended up doing 3 coats. Now we did the first coat in Cappuccino. I'm now using a natural, just so the color didn't get any darker. So the natural is more clear. It's not a clear coat, but it's more of a clear stain, so it'll just kind of richen up the colors.
How many coats did you do altogether on this?
I think it was 3.
But
so
just the first coat with the Cappuccino.
Correct. And the more coats you do, the more protection it's going to add. So obviously for something like this, you want to go, I wouldn't go any less than 3 or 4, just since you're going to be sitting drinks and stuff on it. And then give it its proper drying time.
Now the magic happens. Ethan built me this cute little floor, and we use this just to stage our photos. Like I said, we're flipping furniture so we can sell it in our booth. So when we get a piece of furniture done, we'll just set up this little area and stage our furniture and take a cute picture of it to put on our Facebook.
And we don't have a lot of space. We have a small house, a small garage slash workshop, so we make do with what we have.
Getting some records, a little Frankie. A lantern that I had in our own living room that I pilfered. A little plant, my new little aloe plant, and just a small little knickknack.
Keeping it simple on this one.
Sometimes you gotta keep it simple. Now we have an actual nice camera, but I'm lazy and the phone seems to take pretty good pictures, so here we go. It's easy to take a picture. Also had a sign hanging up on the wall that we need to get pictures of, so if you see me taking pictures of random things up on the wall, that's why. Anyway, I snap a few pictures, upload it to Facebook. Voila! Finished product. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video with us. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do.
Like, share, and subscribe.
And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing.
See you next time.
Bye.